Hi, Billy Glisson with PowerCore 360. Today I'm going to show you 3 ways to prevent volleyball hitting related injuries to the shoulder and back. So today we're going to work on proper positioning of the shoulder and spine, strength and flexibility exercises, and the use of whole body rotational hitting mechanics. If you like this video, make sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give us a thumbs up down below. If you're interested in PowerCore 360 products, go to powercore360.com. So to prevent injuries to the shoulder and back, the first thing we're going to look at is the position, postural position of the shoulders and back. We're going to pretend Nicole here is a high school or a club or a middle school player. And if I walk in and I look as a coach and I see the typical posture for a high school or middle schooler with the shoulders rounded forward, the back kind of rounded forward in kind of this C curve position, then that's the first thing I need to understand is her shoulder and her back or her spine are really in a bad position, and so I want to improve that. What I'd like to do is cue her posturally to where if I was looking from the side view, if I could draw up a straight line from her ear, that line ought to go from her ear through her shoulder and through her hip joint. That's what we're looking for, but once again, for a lot of high school athletes or middle school athletes and even some collegiate athletes, we walk in and we see this. Heads forward, shoulders rounded forward, and the back kind of takes on this C shape. We want to avoid that. We need to correct that. So when we're looking at the shoulder complex itself, I just want to give you a good visual of kind of what's happening as we take the elbow. If we were just lifting the arm up and we took the elbow up to shoulder level, I want to give you a good visual of kind of what's happening. So this is the scapula, this is the shoulder joint, this is the humerus, this long bone here. And what I want you to notice is this piece of yellow tubing is representing what a muscle, part of the rotator cuff, the top part of it called the supraspinatus. And what can happen is that arm raises up, is this bone when it comes up here can actually start to pinch off this opening or shut down this opening where the supraspinatus comes out and it actually attaches to the humerus. So in this case, if she continues to lift her elbow up above shoulder level, we actually can pinch that area off. And oftentimes that might be referred to with volleyball players who get, quote, a hot shoulder and inflamed shoulder. They get anterior superior impingement. What that means is, anterior meaning the front of the shoulder, superior meaning the top, they can get pain, inflammation on the top and front part of their shoulder. And oftentimes it's just a function of how high they're lifting their elbow. If we lift the elbow higher than shoulder level, then that can tend to impinge there. So when we're hitting, and if we have her take just solely an arm swing that starts with her arm in front of her body, and she lifts a straight arm up to go ahead and swing, and she raises it way up, we can get into that same position to where we're impinging on that supraspinatus or the other tissues that might be there. If she swings a lot like that, mechanically that can put stress once again on the supraspinatus or other tissues there, cause inflammation. Down the road we can get bone spurs that get created on the bottom of the shoulder, top of the humeral head in that joint, and it can actually fray on that part of the rotator cuff, the supraspinatus. That can create significant problems and lead to surgery. Okay, so in the last segment, what I showed you was the right scapula, the right shoulder blade in a good position. Now I'm going to have her assume a bad position where the shoulder's rounded forward, and so it might be tipped up, so we're a little bit winged, we're a little bit tipped. And I want to show you now what happens to the supraspinatus, which is now moved forwards and almost really downwards. As she starts to lift her arm up now, just elbow up to shoulder height, because this is rotated and tipped forward, we actually really run out of real estate a lot quicker. We don't get as much range of motion in the shoulder, so she doesn't even have to hardly try to lift her elbow up above the shoulder level to get into a good hitting position, and we're already starting to pinch off this shoulder. So the first thing we have to do to prevent the pain and injury and problems to this shoulder joint is, once again, we have to fix the position of where the shoulder is, the postural position of the shoulder blade. So when she pulls back into that good position, the muscles on the back side of the shoulder blade pull the scapula back down flat against the rib cage. That changes the position of the shoulder joint itself. Now when she raises the arm up to go to swing, we actually have more room to get the arm up in that position and not pinch off the supraspinatus or the other muscles or other tissues that might get impinged or pinched in that area. All right, so we're going to look at the front side of the shoulder. We talked about this bad postural position of the shoulder, where the shoulder's rounded forward, maybe tipped up. We know we want to get back into this position, but there's a mechanical reason sometimes that this happens. A lot of athletes were always reaching out in front of us. We're always bent over, so the muscles on the front side of the chest and shoulder oftentimes will get short. And since they attach to the rib cage and the front part of the shoulder and scapula, when they become short, when they shorten this way, they'll actually pull the shoulder and round it in that position. We could go in, and its common thought is just to go in and stretch these muscles, but it's not just a matter of stretching these muscles, the short muscles on the front side of the chest and shoulder. They need to be stretched, but more importantly, if they're stretched but you don't have the proper strength and flexibility on the back side to pull it back here and hold the shoulder complex back here, posturally she's going to go right back into this rounded bad position. Okay, so we're going to look at a healthy shoulder complex as she actually goes through the movements of a right-handed arm swing. So go ahead and perform your motion, Nicole. And really what we're doing here is the first thing we're showing is just as she gets prepared to hit the ball, her shoulders are actually turning and they're preparing. And what's good about this to help prevent injuries to the shoulders, we're not just using the muscles of the shoulder, we're actually using the muscles of the core to rotate. That's going to help us generate more arm speed and actually help us tolerate that. Go ahead and continue. What I want you to see happen is, as she comes up into this position, what's happening with her right shoulder blade is, as she comes up to this position, the muscles underneath the shoulder blade and down below it are actually shortening, contracting, and they are pulling the shoulder blade, or the scapula if you would, down flat against the rib cage. That's extremely important that happens. So she comes back and her arm comes up, the shoulder blade's actually getting pulled down against her rib cage. Okay, so now we're going to show the typical middle school, high school, or even college athlete whose shoulders are rounded forward. She's slumped in her back. We've got this C curve going on. So we're not in the ideal postural position. So now she starts to go through her arm swing and starts to try to turn her shoulders back around and stops right there. You can actually see the right shoulder blade is actually winged out. It's not been pulled down flat against the shoulder, against the rib cage. And in fact, when I do that, when she makes the good correction, her spine starts to correct, she gets more upright, and the shoulder blade should come down against the rib cage there. So hunch for me once again. This is what you have to watch out for your kids who are rounded shouldered and rounded back. As they come into this position, we've already shown what happens to the shoulder blade. In this position, it actually gets winged and gets tipped. It creates problems here, it creates pain, it can create injury in the shoulder, and the real fix is then an exercise that will allow her to do the proper strength and conditioning and movement pattern. So as she's sitting upright, the right exercise that will allow her actually to go into her arm swing and make her scapula get pulled down against her rib cage. So for the first exercise, we're going to work on the turn of her thoracic spine, her T-spine if you would, but we're actually going to integrate or combine the motion of the right scapula as she would go into her hitting motion. So what I'm going to ask her to do is actually start in this position where she's turned to her left, the arms out in front. The first thing I'm going to ask her to do is take her right scap, pull it down against her rib cage, nice, and then tuck her elbow into her side, and now then it's all thoracic spine or shoulder turn if you would. And that's the motion. We're going to just let that go, unwind it, rotate forward, and same thing. Scapula down, we're going to rotate back around, and we're just going to rep that. So we'll do 4, 5, 6 more. Very good. So as we're working on this motion, go ahead and repeat, Nicole. She's going to pull her scapula down against the rib cage. She's going to work on turning her spine back. That's really good for the preparation phase of hitting. But the reality is a lot of injuries happen to the shoulder and oftentimes the rotator cuff as the arm is actually slowing down after the swing. So there's really benefit of doing this exercise, not just coming back, but next time as she comes forward, I want to show you visually what's happening. Her muscles around her spine and shoulder blades, not only did they help turn to get her prepared to create more force and torque, but they're actually now slowing down as she turns forward. They're actually helping slow the arm and scapula movement down by going forward. In reality, what's happening, you continue, what's going on is as these muscles go forward, as she turns her shoulders forward and her arm comes out, the muscles around her back and around her shoulder blade are actually stretching or lengthening, what's called an eccentric contraction. We actually have to work on breaking or slowing the arm down as she turns, and with her arm being extended out front by the band pulling her forward to where we get the benefit of that piece of the exercise. Okay, so I'm going to show a little more advanced progression to this exercise. She's going to start rotated like she's hit the ball forwards. Shoulders are turned to the left. First motion is to take the scapula, pull it down against her rib cage, tuck her elbow into her side, and rotate her shoulders back to me. Okay? Now we're going to bring the arm up into the arm slot and go through a throwing motion going forwards. It's the same motion. We're going to start pulling the scap down, tuck the elbow into the side, rotate around, come into the slot. So it's more advanced that we're actually getting our arm up into the hitting position. And as we go here, we're slowing down over here. As we come back, we're working on the scapula. As we go forward, we're working on the muscles of the spine and of her shoulder blades and arms, helping to slow the arm down as it comes forward, working on the eccentric phase of that. Right. All right, so I want to show in standing what it looks like for good posture once again. We talked a lot about the shoulder and how if the shoulder's lined up correctly, if we've got good postural position of the shoulder, we could drop a straight line. It would go through the center of the ear, center of the shoulder, center of the hip joint. When we talk about the rounded forward position, that the shoulders round forward, they wing, they tip, whatever's going on there. But you can also see that the spine changes. When she comes back to that good postural position, and I show you a spine model in there, from the side view, people talk about the spine being straight. It's really not straight from the side view. There's an S-curve that happens there. When we get into these bad postural positions for volleyball players and the shoulders round forward, the head goes forward, it changes the curve of the spine, and now we start getting more of this C-curve position in there. The shoulder doesn't like that when she swings. The spine's not going to like that when she swings. We want her to be able to know where good postural position is. We want her to do the right training exercises, strength and conditioning wise and flexibility wise, to where she can get into that position. She has not only the strength to get there, but the endurance to stay there, and then the strength, endurance, and power to do that as she plays a match, that everything continues to be in the right position for the shoulder and for the low back, so we're preventing bad postural positions and the negative consequences of being in those positions. Okay, so let's talk about the role of mechanics, hitting mechanics, and how it impacts the shoulder and the spine. We're going to start off and we're going to pretend Nicole was 8, 9, 10, 12 again, starting her first day of club volleyball, and it's very common for her to use just her arm to stay square to the net and just raise her hitting arm straight up and take it forward to hit. It's very simple to teach, it's very simple to perform, there's not a lot of complex movement going on, so it's very simple. The problem is oftentimes a lot of hitters oftentimes don't mature much further than this. So let's talk about what's happening to the shoulder. I'm actually going to turn her around, and we're going to pretend now that the net is straight ahead. She's going to continue to do that same motion. We're going to go back and we're going to talk about what's happening with the right shoulder blade and the shoulder complex here. So I'm going to have her take her arm up into the top position and just freeze right there. So we talked earlier today about what happens with the shoulder and how when the arm comes straight up, how the arm, the humerus, this long bone comes up, and how when the elbow gets above shoulder level, that we start actually having some issues here with impingement between where my finger would be here. We lose that amount of real estate and we can get the supraspinatus or other muscles or other tissues in there getting pinched into that area. So ideally what we'd like to do is we want to change this swing. And what we'd like her to do is as she comes up, I'd like her to bring her arm and elbow and keep her elbow no higher than shoulder level. So instead of the arm coming straight up in front of the body, what I want her to learn to do is to draw the elbow back, keeping the elbow at shoulder level as she comes back. If she does that, and if I focus just solely on what's happening at the shoulder right now, I've put the shoulder in a much more stable or controlled position. And in terms of the opening, you can see the difference now of the opening between the top of the humerus and the top of the shoulder there. That area, there's a lot more area for the supraspinatus, other muscles, tissues, and blood vessels and nerves for that perspective to give room for those to come out. So she can go through her arm swing, take a swing, the shoulder rotates in that position, go ahead and repeat that, and everything is coming back and it's staying in a much more stable, much more controlled position. without pinching on the various tissues. If she continues that, and I now just talk about what's going on in the spine, I want to talk about whole body rotation. So instead of just her arm and shoulder doing the work, I actually want her to rotate her shoulders. Just like when we did the exercise, we had her sitting in the chair, her shoulders were turning and her hips really weren't turning that much. We're getting hip and shoulder separation. To get here, she has to use a lot of the rotational or rotary muscles around the spine, the shoulder blades, to actually turn her shoulders around. So by using and engaging much more of the muscles of the core, really from the hips and pelvis up, we're getting those muscles. Those are just more engines. Those engines come back to pull the arm back, and because they're stretching now as she takes her body forward and goes to swing, we're actually using those muscles that were stretched back here, and we're helping using those muscles to turn the body forward. That's going to allow us to generate more force, more torque, more arm speed. Repeat that motion, please. Nice. Repeat. So we're using the muscles of the upper body, we're rotating. And now as we swing forward, I'm going to have her go on this next one and go just to contact position and hold. So we get to contact. If we stayed right there, and if I taught her as an outside hitter, if she was hitting left side now, and she was rotating like this, there's a real good likelihood that she's going to pull this ball out of bounds because of the body coming across, the hand coming across the body. The other thing I need her to learn to do, and the good hitters know how to do this, that when she goes to contact once again, and goes to the point where she's actually hitting and freezes right there, the good hitters are actually, I'm going to push her pelvis to this position. I'm trying to get her right arm over her left leg. Really what's happening is the whole pelvis is tipping, and go ahead and let your right leg come off the ground, because that's what's going to happen in the air. We're going to get into this position where the spine is still staying straight, the spine is still turning, the thoracic spine is turning, but if we go back to that contact position, actually what we've done here, if I give you a visual, we've allowed the shoulder blade to work, and we've allowed this arm to stay in a relatively good position as if it was coming straight back here. We've tipped the body and still allowed the shoulder and the shoulder blade to work in a good position where we're not getting that impingement, so much of that impingement syndrome going on there. So it's important that we rotate not only the shoulder, but the spine, but that the spine, this axis is actually tipped in the air to where her right arm is over her left leg at contact. Okay, so a lot of athletes, a lot of hitters, in time will learn how to hit the ball with more and more force. As we showed earlier, when they start, oftentimes they just raise up the arm, and it's just arm and shoulder. As they start to mature a little bit, oftentimes they'll start to learn to use their core. And the way they use their core is they oftentimes will arch their back or extend back, and then they will flex coming forward. So they're using back muscles coming back, and they're using their abs to go forwards. Conceptually, that's a great concept. You're using more muscles in different parts of the body to generate more force. The problem is, oftentimes what we get into is that if we look at the spine, and if she continues that oftentimes what's called arching, extending and flexing, or sometimes it's called a pike position where we're doing that and then we're going forwards, the athlete will show up with back pain. Shoulder might be fine, but they start having pain in their lower back or mid-back. She's really overarching her back, and what we showed earlier was from the side view, we're looking for this nice S-curve from the side. From the back view, if she continues to do that, what ends up happening is she may end up just extending and flexing from one part of her spine more than another. And instead of spreading out over the entire spine, keeping her spine in what we call this straight, aligned, or neutral position, she's actually just continually going and bending from the same spot over and over. So it might be, in this case, I might be looking at her low back. She continues to arch there, and all the action or stress ends up being mechanically at the same spot of her spine. And like what we talked about before is, it could be like a metal coat hanger. If you take a metal coat hanger and continue to bend it over and over at the same spot, initially it's going to warm up. In time, it's going to fail and break at where it was hinging from. What we want her to learn to do is to use her core, but instead of using her core from an extension to a flexion pattern, is we want her to go ahead and start your arm swing, bring her arm back, elbow at shoulder height, rotate her spine around. Her spine is still aligned straight. We're not extending it and flexing it. we're rotating it from the thoracic spine. It's designed to turn, right? So what we're asking her to do is to learn an arm swing, which is whole body and rotation. Continue, please. To where we're engaging more of the muscles of her core, her hips, her pelvis, her legs to generate more power. But not only does it generate more power, it's better tolerated. Better tolerated because we're now creating greater forces. We want those forces to come from the thoracic spine, and actually when she really learns how to use her hips, and she knows how to do it, but when athletes learn how to use their whole core, their hips and pelvis will turn first, the shoulders will turn second. She's actually spreading those forces out over the turn of her thoracic spine and her hip joints, her spine staying in an aligned, healthy position. So from an injury prevention perspective, we haven't talked about the follow-through. It's really part of mechanics, but we want to demonstrate what good mechanics look like in terms of follow-through. If we go back to the initial athlete learning just to bring their arms straight up in front of them and swing, it's predominantly arm and shoulder. So it's smaller muscle groups being able to create the force, but also to slow the arm down as it's trying to slow down. You can hit the ball hard that way. What we prefer to do is we start adding some shoulder turn and some rotation to it, so that once again we're starting to rotate the entire body to create and generate force and torque, but also then more importantly as we start to follow through, instead of the arm coming just down straight down to the right side of the body here, we actually want the arm to follow the turn of the shoulders. So the hip's going to turn, the shoulder's going to turn, and the arm is actually going to follow the turn of the shoulders, and the hand is actually going to go where the ball needs to go. That's okay. That's the same thing a major league pitcher does when they're throwing 90 or 100 miles an hour. They don't bring the arm straight up here and go there. They rotate their entire body and follow through with that. When she gets done, we want her hitting shoulder to actually be pointing towards the target that she hit the ball towards. When she does that then, and I'm going to have you hold right in that position, not only is the arm and the shoulder blade, those muscles stretching and slowing the arm down, but we have lat muscles, back muscles, we even go across to the lower hip and butt muscle and the hamstring over here. All these muscles from here to here are helping slow down the turn of the spine and slow down the arm. So we're spreading the forces out, not only to generate more forces, but to tolerate more forces, more arm speed, and prevent injuries not only to the shoulder, but to the back as well. Okay, let's talk about what happens on the front side of the body to help prevent injuries to the shoulder and the back. As we go through our hitting motion, and we start off with where she might have started when she was 10 or 12 with just the arm motion, coming forwards, and then we set in time, a lot of athletes will start to figure out how to engage their core. They do that by arching the back backwards and then flexing it forwards. That is engaging their core. It takes one set of muscle groups called your rectus abdominis, which go from the top of her pelvis to the bottom of the rib cage, and as she arches her back, they stretch, and then automatically on their own they shorten to pull her forward. Go ahead and do that again, arch back, they pull her forward. That's great because it engages and creates more forces from her core. The problem is, remember on the back side, it's arching and moving her back at the same spot over and over, so she may not tolerate that. She may show up with a low back that hurts. What we want to do is go to whole body rotation. So she starts a whole body rotational pattern, and she steps and she takes a turn with her hips, and we become more rotational, less extension and flexion. What happens is she goes from right there and just loads into that position there. We're going to now introduce some other abdominal muscles. Internal, external obliques sit here on the side, and they work in kind of this oblique or X pattern. And so basically as she takes her shoulders back and stays there, it's going to actually stretch these muscle groups here, and now they want to shorten on their own. As they shorten, as her hips turn, it brings her shoulder blades and shoulders through. Do that one more time. We get a good stretch, we're engaging the core, those muscles stretch, they shorten and bring her through. It will allow her to generate more force and more arm speed to hit the ball harder. And then as she follows through, go ahead and do that motion again. We're going to load. We're going to step, turn our hips, turn our shoulders, and we're going to follow through. The muscles over here then also sit in those diagonal or oblique patterns, and these muscles that go from the top of the pelvis to the bottom of the rib cage, as she follows through there, they actually stretch and they help slow the turn of the shoulders down, right? Which also helps to slow down the arm itself. So by engaging the core, and more importantly the rotational muscles of the core, it allows us to generate more arm speed and tolerate more arm speed, not only for the shoulder, but now we're turning with the spine. It's much better than just the arm only. It's much better than the extension flexion pattern, because now we're putting the spine in a good position. We're turning from the hips and turning from the thoracic spine. We're using the correct abdominal muscles to actually generate and tolerate the turn for the arm. If you like this video, make sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give us a thumbs up down below. If you're interested in PowerCore 360 products, go to powercore360.com.